In the circus, the intent is to impress people with how many plates you can spin at once. That is a recipe for ADHD, disaster, and self-defeating. Self-destruction, actually, that's what I really should say. It's a recipe for self-destruction, having too many plates in the air. And we tend to do that because that's our nature.
What's up, ADHD Rewired listeners, and happy April. Can you believe April is already here? That means our spring coaching groups starts April 11th. That's right. If you are listening to this on the day it came out, that means our 36th season of our award-winning coaching and accountability groups starts next week. And we are hosting a registration event this Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern, or you can schedule a one-on-one and meet with me or someone from my team. If you're new to us and you're looking for support with your ADHD, we've been here since 2014, and we've had nearly 1,200 people go through our program. If you're looking for a strong and thriving community so you can make real lasting connections and build the skills and strategies to live a better life with ADHD, come join us. Payment plans are available, including PayPal's 6 months, 0% interest financing for qualified applicants, which means you could join us for as low as $275 a month. And if you can't do PayPal, we're also offering 3-month payment plans directly with us. Also, we're hearing from more and more of our members that they've successfully have been able to get their employers to pay for the program and have allowed them to even do the program during their workday to participate. So it might be worth having that potentially slightly awkward conversation with your employer, but I think it'll be worth it. Your enrollment fee not only covers our 10-week intensive, it also includes 6 months of everything we have to offer in our alumni membership community, which includes 3 coach-led sessions per week and multiple peer-led sessions every day. I'm telling you, if you're committed to growth, if you're tired of trying harder and not getting anywhere, and you're looking for a well-established, thriving community where you're going to feel like family, you're going to love it here. Stop hemming and hawing. Break through your indecision. And if you're wondering why it feels like I'm talking directly to you, because I am. Especially you, Jennifer and Mark, and that you whose name I forgot, but you get it. I also know you want to join, but you're hesitating because time and time again, our alumni tell us that this is what they went through before they joined, and they really do wish they joined sooner. Want to find out more? Want to talk to someone? Go to coachingrewired.com and get on our interest list and attend our registration event on Thursday, or schedule a time to meet with me or someone on my team. Go now to coachingrewired.com. And as of this release, we are getting ready to launch our brand new website. So just in case something weird happens to when our site goes live, please reach out to us at support@ADHDrewired.com and we'll be there for you. Oh, and if you're listening to this on the day it came out, mark your calendars because my team and I will be going live on Zoom next Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 Eastern for our monthly live Q&A, where you can ask me and my team questions. All right, more at the break. And now on with today's show featuring the amazing Stephen Sharp Nelson from the Piano Guys. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. I am very excited today to welcome Stephen Sharp Nelson. Let me read this bio for you.
Oh, great, a bio. Another bio. Sorry, everybody.
You know, if this were a video format, you may recognize his face, but let's do this. So, mix together cello, ADHD, and an insatiable need for sushi, and you get Stephen Sharp Nelson, one of the most watched musicians in the world, a self-titled dorky dad. Stephen attributes his hard-earned, unlikely success story to his unending love for helping people feel the worth of their own soul through music. Name a concert venue, he's sold it out. Name an iconic place in the world, he's filmed a music video there with the Piano Guys. His content is watched and streamed over 3 million times every day. He's performed and spoken to 2 million people around the world As much as he loves all of this, his favorite thing in the world is one-on-one time with his wife and each of his 4 children who tolerate and sometimes even love his quirky, creative persona. He is passionate about music education and its critical role in our culture. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Eric. Thanks so much for having me on Rewired. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
I tell you, I was just before we hit record, I was telling Stephen that I was feeling a little bit nervous. And the thing that was actually starting to make me feel a little bit nervous was, I've been following you for a long, long time. My son and I would watch your videos when he was very little. And when awesome. I saw you at the CHAD conference, it was a very ADHD moment. I saw you were going to be a keynote. I forgot you were going to be a keynote. I walk into the conference hall where you're doing the keynote and go, "Oh, he's keynote. This is it." And it was brilliant.
That's an upside of ADHD is sometimes we forget good news too. And when it comes back around, we're like, "Hey, this is great." It's like finding $20 in your pocket you forgot you put there. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. And one of the things that I'm just now kind of getting to know about you is you are so much more than just a musician, and a brilliant one at that. But just that you're kind of a philosopher and a deep thinker and
yes,
and very relatable. So thank you for being here.
Oh, that's kind of you to say. Thank you. I'd like to think of myself as an amateur social scientist, but I think all of us in a way are, if we are being mindful of our own brain processes and attitudes and gifts that we've been given and our weaknesses, and to embrace them. And so that's kind of why it's sort of drawn me in is first of all, it was the music's power and effect on the brain. And that kind of took me down this wonderful journey and this rabbit hole that I've enjoyed so much of the functionality of the brain, the physiology of the brain. So I guess you could say I'm a very, very amateur social scientist, and I've tied it in with music and ADHD, and have found great resonance not only in me, but in talking to others and speaking with others.
When we were talking last week, when we had our pre-interview, one of the things that I felt, I was just really grateful and appreciative of just your openness and transparency, just about who you are and kind of where you are in life. And we were talking a little bit, I was sharing with you that, I'm getting ready to take a vacation, and that I've been kind of feeling a bit of burnout. And you kind of shared with me that you're kind of experiencing some similar things too.
Yeah. I would actually dare to call it chronic burnout, because I feel like I get out of it and I get back in, and I get out of it and I get back in, because I feel like I run faster than I have strength on so many occasions out of my own volition, and sometimes personal self-ignorance, where it's like, okay, you've been here before, what's going on? So if there are people out there listening that feel like burnout has been sort of this perpetual cycle that they've confronted on many occasions, I just want to know that I'm with you and you're not alone. And I really would like to be best friends with you and talk to you about how burnout can actually be an indicator of your strengths rather than your weaknesses. And it could just be an indicator of how awesome you are at kicking into overdrive. And really, it's a matter of, we're talking about channeling rather than like diagnosing and solving it like a disorder or a disease. I prefer the term channeling. And so if you start to consider yourself as someone that likes to kick into overdrive, but that we could better learn and practice, it's one of my favorite words, because, I love practicing my cello, said no one ever. Practicing the art of self-awareness and channeling and hyperfocus, let's call it healthy hyperfocus, because there is unhealthy hyperfocus too, Eric. And I've experienced it. Maybe all of you out there, some of you out there that are listening have experienced this unhealthy hyperfocus too. So let's make that part of our conversation today, among myriad topics. Is perpetual burnout can often be a result of unhealthy hyperfocus and overdriving your overdrive.
Ooh, overdriving your overdrive. So how do you personally distinguish between that, what you're calling the good hyperfocus and the overdrive hyperfocus that leads to burnout?
Let's first talk about balance, Eric. Balance is so elusive And I can't stand the term perfect balance. Can we just have an understanding that that needs to be assassinated, that term? It just needs to be done away with and never say it or hear it again. Perfect balance does not exist. Say it with me. If you're listening to this, a perfect balance does not exist.
I'm
Okay,
feeling
now do
it.
you feel a little bit more free? Yeah, I feel more free even saying that. A perfect balance does not exist. It is this funny image, and we all define it differently. But sometimes an image could come, especially in our neurodivergent gifted minds of ADHD crowd. When somebody that perhaps is neurotypical, whatever that means, I mean, that's such a objective, subjective term. Somebody who's potentially neurotypical would be like, well, a perfect balance means that I'm just giving the attention to the things that need attention. Now, well, for me, that doesn't, no. Perfect balance, I have this image of being in this Zen mode, and all of my fingers are holding every single role and responsibility in perfect balance, like I'm on top of this beautiful mountain and I've got everything in Zen mode. And oh man, it's just like, it's frustrating because I'll never get there. And that's really not what life's not meant to be that way either. So I prefer looking at it, and this has been liberating for me. And I want you to consider this, you who are listening here. Life is spinning plates. And this has actually helped me tremendously, especially with burnout. We have this difficulty being present because of our overdrive tendencies and our ability to connect dots that are so out there. And I love that we're able to do this. I call this self-suggestibility. We can get into that because of our art form and our gift of being able to entertain so many thoughts at once. It's not attention deficit, is it? It's actually attention abundance. And we're on our attention's on so many things. Sometimes we're not present. And I think being not present is the easiest way to be depressed. We're either stuck in the past and rehashing, or we're looking to the future, fearful of something that's coming, or overexcited about something that's coming, and we're not recognizing we've got something incredible in front of us, right in front of us. This is especially apparent as a parent. Eric, you may have felt this. I have a mantra that I recite to myself on many occasions, and it is face down, chin up. And that may sound paradoxical. It's meant to be that way. Whenever I'm anywhere, I always put my phone face down. And it is remarkable how healthy this is for our ADHD minds, because the phone is specifically and scientifically engineered to trigger us into distraction and overstimulus. So if your phone is face down, no matter where you are, if you want it close by as a comfort thing, I kind of need that a little bit. Or if you need it at arm's reach in order to fulfill whatever it is that you need to fulfill, that's fine. Face down, put your chin up, and look people in the eyes that you're with and engage with them in such a present way. I promise your happiness will increase automatically right from the get-go. So for me, I mean, I've had these moments where my phone's face down and my chin's up and I'm looking into my children's eyes, and my daughter is explaining a story to me that is meandering every which direction, but the fact that I'm not trying to scroll my phone and listen to her at the same time, I actually will get tears in my eyes sometimes when I'm looking at her in the eyes and realizing how much I love her and how much she means to me, even though she's telling the story about this game she was playing at recess, and I'm not even understanding half of what she's saying, but just looking into these beautiful hazel eyes and taking it in and being so present, you'll find yourself touched and in this spiritual moment of like, wow, this is really happening right now, and nothing in the past or the future could ever compete with what's happening in the present right now. So that's something that I would suggest immediately incorporating, if you don't already, is the face down, chin up technique, especially given our gifts. And now, Eric, we've reached that inevitable moment in the interview when I've forgotten what the question was originally. What are we talking about? Oh, we're talking about plates. Okay, let's get back. Hey, I came back around.
Winner.
See that? There's hope. There's hope for us. So this is a parable. I want to call it the parable of the spinning plates, because it actually is so relevant when it comes to being present and finding happiness, and also getting rid of this spurious, horrible, nefarious belief that there's some kind of perfect balance out there. What we have to focus on is our various roles and responsibility is akin to a plate spinning on a pole. Now, I hope you've seen this, Eric. You've seen this, haven't you, in your life, where it's sort of an old school circus act, putting a porcelain plate and spinning it on this little tiny long pole and then doing that as many times as possible. Well, in the circus, the intent is to impress people with how many plates you can spin at once. That is a recipe for ADHD, disaster, and self-defeating. Self-destruction, actually, that's what I really should say. It's a recipe for self-destruction, having too many plates in the air. And we tend to do that because that's our nature. So imagine yourself, you've got plates in the air right now, and you can think of what they are. Eric, name me 3 plates that are up in the air for you right now.
Coaching groups,
Okay.
my study hall community, and going on vacation.
Okay, great. So those are plates all up in the air. Okay. If you attempt to spin all the plates at once, first of all, it's unnecessary. Second, you're actually going to do more harm than good, and you're actually going to cause more wobbling than stability. But why do we insist on doing this all the time? So when I'm on tour, I have the tour plate. And I tell you, if I'm trying to spin the tour plate at the same time as spinning the family plate, it'll only lead to frustration and self-guilt. So instead, when I'm on tour, I am spinning that tour plate so effectively, and I'm checking in with my family, and just spinning that plate only when absolutely necessary. Then when I get home, I am spinning that family plate fiercely, furiously, and joyfully. And that tour plate is spinning on its own. I don't even need to think about it, address it, talk to it, nothing. It's spinning on its own because I've already been spinning it so much, and I've spun it in a way where it can be on its own. And so this is where we get into, I call them the non-negotiable. I know that's such a great dad thing to call them. Non-negotiable plates. The plates, when they're wobbling, it is non-negotiable that we have to address them to get them stable again. There are plates in your life that I hope are totally negotiable. That where you could say that's wobbling, but I don't have the time, the energy, or the ability, or the desire even to spin that. And so it's going to wobble and it may potentially fall. Or you may put it down of your own volition, which is a safer way to do it, honestly, so it doesn't break. But I've decided that if I have more than 3 plates that are non-negotiable in my life, I am in chronic burnout. So if you're in chronic burnout, how many plates do you have in the air that are non-negotiable? You can have 15 plates in the air. That's fine. I don't want to limit you there. But you've got to decide which ones are so mission critical. And for me, that's faith, family, and fitness. Those are my 3 Fs. Fitness meaning like wellness, emotional wellness, physical wellness, spiritual wellness, all those. Faith, family, and fitness. If any of those are wobbling, I don't care what's happening on the other plates. They can wobble and all fall for as much as I care. I am focused and present on those plates. And that's actually freed me up because I can now be guilt-free when I'm spinning a particular plate that needs it and others are wobbling. I can now say, hey, that's okay. I can let that go. Or I could say, look, I'm just going to spin this a little bit more until it's stable, and then I'm going to go back to that plate that needs spinning rather than insisting on trying to grow 10 arms and spin 10 plates at the same time. So if you're in chronic burnout, analyze which plates are non-negotiable. And then when you're spinning them, the worst thing you can do is look around and try to spin with your mind other plates because you're not telekinetic. I'm sorry to let you know. Just be present when you're spinning that plate. And the more present you are, the better your spin and the better stability you're going to have when you move on to another plate that needs your attention. So
Let me ask you about this. So you had said earlier that, not being present equates to being depressed. And
yes,
so I was thinking of, when I saw you in your keynote presentation, if for those musicians out there or those who have seen musicians who as you watch them perform and you can see how they're feeling the embodiment of the music, there's a certain feel that kind of comes over their face, and it's like they become one with their instrument. And the thing that struck me about watching you during your keynote is there was no like gradual on-ramp to that embodiment. Like you picked up the cello and you were there. Like you were so in it. And that made me sort of curious is how you're able to get so present and so in that so quickly.
I don't know if I've ever been asked that question, Eric. That's a beautiful question. And thank you for helping me be more self-aware of that because I really didn't know that I could lightning fast switch into that mode. One thing I've learned from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, bless his heart, is first of all, like, sometimes I look at his life and feel like, I'm nothing. That's the wrong approach because, he started composing symphonies at age 8, bless his heart. But one thing that I loved about Mozart is as bad of a rap as he gets for being all over the place. And by the way, there was a paper in 2007, I mentioned this in my keynote, where scientists were pretty determinedly convinced that he did have ADHD. So that's awesome. But he talks about music is in the space between the notes and in the silence between the notes. And what does that mean to you, those that are listening? What does that mean to you? And to me, one thing is the meaning of life is in between our expectations. I think the space between our expectations is where we find meaning. And in music, when I'm transported to that zone that you're talking about, the flow, whatever term you want to use, there's lots of social scientific terms that you could use. When I'm in between the notes and I'm not focused on the perfection of the notes and getting them just right, but instead I'm focused on feeling the space between the notes, I can be more confident with the music because I'm feeling that if I'm feeling it, the audience is feeling it. And the purpose of music is edification. The principle of edification is so critical. And this is resonance. It factors into resonance. If I'm resonating in myself, I'm resonating with an audience, and therefore we are edified together. This is a beautiful word. Edification requires both, it's a mutually benefit requirement. So it's this mutualism between speaker and listener, performer and audience, and writer and reader. It's this connection that you have where both of you are lifted as a result. So it's not just a musician saying, you're so lucky to hear me. And it's not an audience saying, wow, you're such a big star or whatever. It's actually, I'm benefiting from the audience as much as they're benefiting from me. And I believe that this is something anybody can tap into. And the best way to tap into it for me is prayer. I use prayer to tap into that, where I try to bring myself out of my own head, get over myself, and try to build myself a place of unselfishness and say, okay, God, I'm here for a reason. I want to be edified, but I want to do my best to get out of my own head and to get over myself and my own ego, and hopefully help someone to feel the worth of their own soul out in the audience. Even if it's one person, just help them to feel lifted, help them to feel lighter than they came in. I love when people bring heaviness to my keynotes and my musical performances, and they leave lighter. Eric, that is so fulfilling. And I hope that all of you are after something like that in your life, where people can bring heaviness to you and leave lighter. That's true edification, because I benefit from that. We're twice blessed, like Shakespeare talks about. It's a twice blessed. Portia talks about that. His character Portia. So if we are locked into that, I use prayer, you can use meditation, you can use intention, you can use visualization. All of these are very effective techniques, but use something. Don't expect that you can walk out and be in that mode like you were talking to me, Eric, without practice and without having intention about it. But also, if you don't use prayer, use it. You don't have to be religious to pray. You don't have to necessarily be 100% spiritual, locked in a particular dogma. Use prayer like you use meditation, and just send your intention out, ask for help, and I promise you, you will lock into that edification and that mutual resonance so much more readily. And Merrick, maybe now that I've done that for 20 years, it is pretty natural for me, and it does happen pretty quickly.
Because you definitely have this like look of, it's delight. It's this delight. It's this almost like sensual relationship you have with the audience and your instruments. And like, I think every person in that venue felt it. They felt it, and it was. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, and and it was beautiful. And what I would love to do before we take a quick break is ask you to play something for us.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna go into recording engineer mode here, and making sure we're getting. So you're not just gonna get the cello via Zoom, because that's horrible. I'm gonna get a recording set up here.
Awesome.
What should I play, Eric?
Oh man,
I have an idea. I want to play you a song, and I'm just going to play. I wish I could play the piano part for you as well, but I'm just going to play this cello solo part for you, which I don't know if I've ever really done. So this is going to be fun. This is a Puccini melody written, 150 years ago or so, and he was the master lyrical melodist, I guess you could say, of the opera world. Puccini wrote this piece. It's called Nessun Dorma, and you might not recognize the title, but I think you'll recognize the melody because it's so immortal. But the thing I love about this is called Nessun Dorma, means no one sleeps, and there's a long story behind it. But I want you to think about how you've got this mind that seems to never sleep. And there are times when that's very annoying and very difficult, especially at nighttime, right? When you wake up in the middle of the night and you all of a sudden you're in fifth gear, you go from 0 to 5. Like, how did that happen? But I also want you to recognize the glory and majesty and beauty of having a sleepless mind that is constantly working on things that potentially could lift others. And because you're so engaged all the time, as you channel that and as you discover how you could be unselfish with it, it becomes a powerful force for good in this world. And I want you to know, those of you who are listening, I want you to lock into this piece of music and just listen to it and visualize this powerful wave that's emanating from you that actually is lifting others. And I promise you, it is so much more powerful than you give it credit. There are people out there that may not even know that you've affected them positively. And there are people out there that need your positive influence so badly that this is sort of your theme song. Your mind never sleeps when it comes to your purpose and the good that you can do in this world.
Can I ask you, before you start, do you have on
Yes.
Zoom this setting where you can have it play original song for musicians on? Just because I know we're not going to use that part, we're gonna cut it in whatever you're recording, but I want to hear it in good quality. Mm.
Okay, there you go. over Zoom.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we will have more from Stephen Sharp Nelson. We will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from our coaching community and our award-winning intensive coaching and accountability groups. A new month is here, which means a new season of coaching is right around the corner. Group starts on April 11th. That's next week. So if you've been putting it off, now is the time. This is the last minute. Why not join us to get your ADHD rewired? Go to coachingrewired.com or email us at support@adhdrewired.com to get in touch with either myself or someone on my team so we can help you get registered and answer your most pressing questions. Do you have every intention of starting that new house project? Need to get your home spring or summer ready? Want to update your resume, launch your business, or incorporate a new habit? But when the time comes to start, you feel like you've already run out of steam? Does anxiety take over every time you try to plan? Because no matter how much you intellectualize knowing how planning can be helpful, those plans seem to fall apart when the future becomes the present. That's where coaching can help, because we're here to meet you where you are at. When you join group coaching with ADHD Rewired, your support will include a group of people where you will be seen, understood, accepted, and celebrated, no matter where you are on your ADHD journey. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to ADHD management, so we'll be there for you to help you create your own personalized strategies that fits your unique and wonderful ADHD brain.
I joined because I was frustrated with feeling mediocre, and also because I wanted to really understand ADHD. I recently got diagnosed maybe about 2 years ago, but I was not making any progress. I didn't know which way to go. I think it was easier before when I didn't know that there was something called ADHD in me at that time. And then it was ADHD. Okay, so how do we solve this? And I can figure that out. When I think of success, now I think of it as in terms of small wins. It's what success means for me, not what it means for the world.
I decided to join this group because I was desperate. I had been looking at this for a while. I just couldn't manage with a 9-to-5 job. And I just knew the power of, groups in general from my background. And it looked like a lot of the work had been done to get people together, because I knew the power of accountability. Things I learned, realized, discovered. A big thing was coming out of the funk that I've been in for the last 3 years. Something that really raised my self-esteem was being able to get to work, 15 minutes early, make me feel better when I wasn't feeling very well. And all the things I learned about the steps that it took to get there. Every little individual, one small thing that led to me getting to work on time. The night before, getting to sleep, getting rest. I just have a new realization of everything that's involved, and it all kind of links together. Thank you all.
So if you're sick of trying harder and want to try something different, if you're craving real connection and community, and you could fully commit to 5 to 7 hours a week for our 10-week intensive coaching program, and are comforted by the idea that we are including 6 months of membership in our alumni community after the season ends, so you won't have to worry about slipping back into old habits, and if you do slip, you'll be surrounded by other neurodivergent ADHD brains just like you who have been there too and are ready to help you bounce back. Say goodbye to constant shame, overwhelm, dread, and chaos, and say hello to a better life with ADHD Rewired's coaching and accountability groups. Join us this week for our last scheduled registration event on Thursday, April 4th at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, or schedule a one-on-one with us at our website. We start next week on Thursday, April 11th. Go to coachingrewired.com to get your pre-registration process, or email us at support@adhdrewired.com to get in touch. That's coachingrewired.com. Come grow with us. And now, on with the show. All right. We are back with Stephen Sharp Nelson from the Piano Guys.
Welcome back. Thanks for coming back.
You told me something that was a little surprising last week.
Hey, yeah.
It was a two-parter. You said you love cello. You also said you hate cello.
Oh, that's such a horrible word. I'm so sorry. I used the H word. I must have been feeling extremely dramatic at that point.
So, and I think part of what you were saying was that there are so many variables on the
Mm,
cello, right?
mm.
And so I was wondering if you can just maybe talk a little bit about this and this metaphor that you've been talking about as sort of ADHD and the cello as this like sort of analogy for each other.
Oh, thanks for letting me tell this. This is still a concept that I'm formulating. So I really would love feedback from your audience on this, but it's something that I've really discovered that's helped me see, like I always talk about the glory and the majesty of this gift. And it's not just toxic positivity, like which is the dumbest term ever, but it's not just an effort to be toxically positive. This is actually a genuine desire to appreciate and be grateful for and tap into this incredible gift that I've been given, which is unique to me and which your gift is unique to you. But I want you to recognize something that I learned very painfully, but now looking back in retrospect has been a big boon and a big blessing for me. When you start playing a string instrument, I'm going to take the cello specifically just because it's right in front of us here and it's relevant and it's the best instrument in the world. No bias here, of course. Yes. You take the cello and I want you to compare it with other instruments like a piano or a guitar or a wind instrument or a trumpet per se. Many of these instruments I mentioned, apart from the cello, they have frets, they have hammers, they have buttons that you push, none of which exist on a cello. I don't have frets, I don't have buttons, I don't have hammers. And as a result, the first 2 years of playing the cello, you pretty much don't want anybody in the room with you as you're playing it. I mean, I call it the stage. It's just like so much screeching and scratching. And why would anybody want that? I would never have done it had my father not insisted on it and given me incentives and even contingencies of my ability to live in the home and eat. And he did so benevolently, but very firmly. If I had not had someone to help me through that stage, I would not have done it because it's just too difficult. So, here's the reason why. The cello has over 1 million, nobody's calculated it per se, but I'd say it's well over 1 million variables in the performance of it. I will give you several examples. How much pressure you apply with the bow, how fast the bow is going, the angle at which the bow is hitting the string, which string you're hitting, where your finger is positioned, the curvature of your finger, the position of your thumb on the back of the fingerboard, the vibrato that you use or do not use, the amount of rosin on your bow, whether the string is in tune or not, what position you're playing in, whether you're engaging your thumb in that position. There are so many variables. And if you start mathematically multiplying themselves once against each other, meaning the combination of them, you would come up with a number, I'm guessing, well over 1 million. The challenge of this is there's so much more to channel and so much more to use and so much more to master. The advantage is expression. Because of so many variables, you have nearly unlimited level of expression that you can project through this instrument. Think about the cost you pay and the reward you get from it. The cost is, of course, trying to master so many different variables, but the benefit and the blessing of it is that I can go from growling like a demon to singing like an angel in one bow stroke.
Hmm.
And I can perform the cello in so many different ways that I could evoke 4 or 5 different emotions from you in the matter of 30 seconds or a minute. This is akin to this beautiful ability that we have as gifted ADHDites, as people with the gift of ADHD. There are many more variables that we have to deal with, and that can become a source of frustration. And also, it can bother people around you. Like my cello bothered people in the beginning because nobody wanted to be in the same room with me. It can cause attrition between you and those that are socially around you. But as you learn to channel and master those variables, you will find a wealth and abundance of expression that will give you the ability to emotionally bless the people around you in such diverse and impactful ways that you will look at this slew of variables and you will bless it rather than curse it. And so the analogy that I draw is you are like a cello. You have so many different ways you can be played and you can play your gifts. And at first that's very challenging, but I promise you that you will one day find yourself with a mastery of expression that will be just what someone needs to hear. And what a gift that is to be an instrument in the hands of the divine in lifting those around you and helping those around you with the gifts that you've been given and the abundance of variables that you can master.
After our conversation from last week, I was sort of thinking about this when you compare the idea, like after you strike the key on the piano, like that's it. It's like, you can affect when you let go of the sustain pedal or when you let go of the key. But one of the things I was thinking of is, so I've played piano since I was 4 years old. And self-taught. My parents tried to have me take lessons, and I sort of did, but I was able to like read the notes that I'm like, oh, this is the part where the song goes up. This is the part where it goes down. Everything else is by ear. Like I never actually learned to read music, which I wish I could because I can hear orchestration in my head. Yeah. So I wish I could write that, like what I'm hearing in my head. Yeah. But one of the things that I really discovered, especially when I was in college and I was performing with other bands and whatnot, is that how like I craved just the acoustic piano, because on the keyboard, there are just too many buttons and sounds that distract me from actually just playing the music, right? And so it's like, I want a piano, if it's a keyboard, it's got to sound great with great speakers. But even then, I find like the actual piano itself, the vibrational tone of a piano, I've yet to experience that on an actual keyboard. I don't care how good the sound system is. So it's just that idea of like so many like options sometimes is too much. And I think for a lot of people with ADHD, especially when there's so many options, we get stuck. And sort of paralysis.
Yep, I agree. I completely agree. And that is the challenge of the string instrument to begin with. When your teacher says, I remember my teacher said they wouldn't even let me play for the first 3 months. I had to first get my posture right, my bow hold right, my finger positioning right. We weren't even playing a note for the first 3 to 6 months.
Oh God, that sounds so boring.
Whereas it was awful. It really was. But whereas with the piano, at least when you're pressing the buttons, it sounds good right from the very beginning. Now, this is not to disparage other instruments. Please don't mistake my meaning. The piano is extremely expressive, and the fact that you can play polyphonically, when I play monophonically, is a real great gift. And I'm just saying that there are more variables. If you want more expression in your life, you're going to have to be willing to understand that you're going to have more variables when it comes to that. And like you said, so many variables, so many options paralyze us. So how do we begin? Well, do what I did as a young cellist. Focus on the lowest hanging fruit and the most critically important variables at first without trying to take them all on at once. I didn't vibrato until my fifth or sixth year of cello. I just didn't. Because my teacher was like, I don't want you to trip over your own feet, or your own fingers rather, and give you too much. I love how in the Bible, in the New Testament, God talks about giving his children his principles line upon line, precept upon precept. And the reason why he does this, in my opinion, is if he gave it to us all at once, it would destroy us. So if you are feeling paralysis, it's because you're trying to take on and master too much at once. Be aware of that. Stop yourself. Say these words. Nope, I'm in charge. I'm deciding what variables I'm working on right now. And you put aside the other variables. You can think of those as spinning plates if you want as well, whatever works for you visually. But I want you to consider, nope, the 3 variables or the 1 or 2 variables or 4, whatever it is that you can handle, these are the ones I'm working on. And the vibrato can wait, because I need to work on my tone right now, or I need to work on my bow speed, or whatever it is you need to work on.
It's another great example of less is more. And I think the other thing that is so important for us as ADHDers to really acknowledge that, if we're working on something, we want progress yesterday.
Yes.
And just sort of acknowledge that uncomfortable feeling that growth and progress on whatever we're working on is probably going to take us more time than we desire.
Yeah, right.
And by trying to by really narrowing the focus, like that less is more approach, which is so hard when our natural tendencies are kind of like, well, if some is good, more is going to feel better, right? So, I mean,
I think that's
so
insightful. I don't know if this is ubiquitous across our gifted community of ADHD people, but positive affirmations are garbage for me. They don't work for me. Like if I look in the mirror and I say, you are smart, you are this or whatever, I sort of just kind of laugh at myself because I'm like, I feel this dichotomy within myself or it's a conflict, a personal, like an inner conflict. But what does work for me, Eric, is cataloging what I'm working on and what I'm not working on at this time. And then when I catch something, if I see something that I'm not happy about with my performance or myself or whatever it is that's under my control, if it's not under my control, forget about it. But if it's under my control, I either will say, hey, I'm working on that. Or I say, I'm going to work on that later. That's something I put on a shelf. You need to shelf the things that are not critically important right now, mission critical for you, and be present and aware and cognizant and diligent with the things that you want to be working on, but make them, like you said, not overwhelming. But then when you get that self-doubt, when you get that feeling of frustration with yourself that you can't do more, because we always struggle with that. We always want to do everything at once and do it so well and perfectly. Well, give yourself grace and say the words, hey, I'm working on it. And that actually really helps me because I just remember that it takes time. And sometimes I'll even give myself an outlandish period of time. Like if I need to work on something, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give myself 6 months on this and I'm going to be consistent and focus on consistency. When you brush your teeth, if you brush your teeth really, really well for 20 minutes once a month, how's that going to go for you? Not well. And the cello is the same way. If I practiced for 8 hours once a month, it would not work. But if I practice for 15 minutes a day, it is such a profound difference. And that works
that
for
idea
exercise.
of spaced repetition. That's how learning
Exactly.
works.
So work on, if you're overwhelmed, narrow down, say I'm working on it, and then focus on consistency. This is the biggest challenge for me, Eric. And I would love I'm diving into this right now, but I'm really analyzing motivation as it's related to me and the way my brain works. And I've decided that motivation is almost completely out of my control. And I've let it be a third party in my life rather than something I'm insisting on driving like a donkey. And what I've decided instead is I can focus on discipline and consistency and let the motivation wax and wane as the days go in and go out. Sometimes I wake up and I feel like I am going to conquer this day. And other days I wake up and say, I want to stay in bed all day. But if I focus on discipline in the phrase, hey, I'm working on it, I actually can find myself in such a better place at the end of the day than if I waited until motivation struck. So let motivation be what it is. It's going to be big one day, none, it's going to be a 10 one day, a 0 another day. Fine. That's okay. That's wonderful. It can help, but don't let it hinder you. Just focus on self-discipline and consistency. And if you do that with time blocking or whatever strategy works for you, then I think you'll find yourself far more fulfilled at the end of the day than just saying, I've heard some people use the technique, well, if I'm motivated, I'll do a lot that day. And then if the next day I'm not, then I'll just take a day off. Maybe that works for you. But for me, I just focus on consistency and discipline and saying, hey, I'm working on it. And it's amazing how much better I feel at the end of the day.
It is definitely a muscle to build, and I think that the idea of like, the whole like Nike logo of like just do it, which I find very like just like it diminishes the struggle that we have with ADHD.
Yeah,
so I like to add the word anyways. Just do it anyways. Like you don't feel like doing it, do it anyways. Just start, right? Because you're not going to always feel like doing it. And I in my coaching groups, I sometimes tell people that like, part of adulting semi-successfully means doing stuff you don't want to do sometimes.
And you have to make read the book Atomic Habits. It's very good for our brain set. It really, really is good at attaching habits and habit stacking. There's lots of techniques in there. One thing that I really want to stress is we have to remove the obstacles between us and the things we want to be consistent at. Observe for a few days or a week, what are the obstacles to the things you want to be consistent at, and remove as many as possible. So this is an example I'll give you that, again, I come back to music. I'm sorry I keep coming back to that. I hope that you could still relate to it. But I get a lot of parents that are like, my child doesn't practice their instrument. And the first question I ask them is, where is it? And they say, what do you mean? Where is the instrument? Oh, it's in their case under their bed. I'm like, okay, that's not going to work, because that simple obstacle of pulling the case out and getting it out that is a great reason not to do it. So I say spend $20 on Amazon, get an instrument stand, have the instrument tuned, have the bow ready to go, have it rosin, have it in their way, basically, when they're walking in and out of their room in a safe place that they're not going to knock into it, obviously. But if that's out, and then I challenge the child, I say, I want you for an entire 2 weeks to sit with your instrument every day. Just sit with it, touch it, sit with it. And it's a low bar goal, but I want you to get into a habit of sitting with your instrument. And I will say, you have no excuse, and you cannot say that I can't do that today, because you can. I want you to get in the habit where you don't miss a day, and you can be perfect at this, that you can, because it's so easy. Sit with your instrument. Now, if you feel like playing, play. That's fine. If you don't. Just sit with it for 1 minute, 2 minutes. That's it. And put it back on its stand. So remove the obstacles between the thing that you want to do and consistently. And then I want you to start low with it and create a habit first, because I think what we do is we get overwhelmed with, well, if I start right now, I'm going to have to spend 2 hours on it. And I don't feel like doing that. I don't have the energy. I don't have the capacity. No. 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes. Just establish the habit first, and use a low bar goal to establish the habit. And it's remarkable how much that can improve your consistency with just something as simple as that. And it's not overwhelming. It's like anybody could do 5 minutes of anything. I can shovel for 5 minutes, for heaven's sake. Yeah, I mean,
break it down as small as possible until it feels accessible, right?
Yes. And then here's the other challenge we have, Eric. I don't know if you ran into this before. Because of our hyper-focus ability, which I love, and I love that it's a superpower, and I say that not just flippantly or tritely. I say that with sincerity, because it is a superpower, where all of a sudden you're creating 8 hours of work out of 2 hours. It's so awesome. And it doesn't happen all the time. But the only danger I'd say with that is if we have a hyper-focused day of 8 hours, and then the next day we want to do it again, what's the problem?
You got no juice left.
Yeah, you don't have juice, and you're worried. You think, I can't do that again. So this is a recommendation I would suggest. Set a timer. And this is the opposite of what you might think. It's not a timer to get you to go to that maximum in whatever activity you are. Let's say it's writing. You're writing a book. You don't set a timer for an hour so that you're challenging yourself to write for an hour. You're setting yourself an hour so that you stop when that hour happens. And what I want you to do is, when you get to the end of that, now for the first 10 minutes, you're going to feel that obstacle of like, oh, I don't have any ideas. This is, the just start problem that you just mentioned, right? But the timer is going, and you're like, I got to make use of this time. So for the first 10 minutes, expect pushback. Then all of a sudden the hyper-focus will kick in. And then when that timer goes off, I want you to be so mad and so angry that that timer's gone off because of how excited you are and engaged in what you're doing, that you think, I cannot wait to get back to it. And it could be that afternoon, it could be the next day. But when you get back to it, you're not going to feel burned out. You're not going to feel intimidated. You're not going to feel, I can't do that again. You're going to say, I want to do that again. So you basically have created a virtual cliffhanger for yourself in the activity that you're trying to be consistent with. As soon as you lock into that hyper focus. Now, for me, sometimes that means because of a deadline, my timer has to be 3 hours instead of 1. This is all, it's arbitrary. You figure out what that number is. But once you cross over that threshold of too much hyper focus, that's unhealthy. And then the next day, you're going to be like, I don't want to touch that thing again for 3 weeks. So analyze how you interact with your hyper focus. Find your flow. If you're never experiencing hyper focus, it means you haven't found your passion in life yet. And I promise you can find it. Keep experimenting, keep trying. But hyper focus does not kick in if it's something that you're not meant to do in life, honestly, or you're entirely disinterested in, or perhaps that is more of an assignment than a passion. But I promise you, once you get good at hyperfocus, you can actually translocate it. You can transpose it musically to something else, another setting that you don't feel like you want to do. Let's not get into that. That's too much of a rabbit hole. But what I'm trying to say is, don't overuse your hyperfocus. If you're finding yourself overusing it, then set yourself some limits, and it can actually be more powerful for you.
I was thinking of when I was in college, and I would literally like sit at the piano for 12 hours without getting up, and my back would be like on fire, or I'd be like literally like falling asleep in front of the piano while playing. And it's like, oh my
Wow.
God. Yeah. So I used to play a lot. We do have to take one more quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some of the new things that you're looking at. I know there was this arc jumping that you're talking about that I wanted to talk about. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with a little more. Stephen Sharp Nelson from the Piano Guys. We will be right back. All right, we are back. So, Stephen, when we were talking last week, you had talked about, when we were talking a little bit about burnout, you were talking about arc jumping, which for me was exciting because my coaching program is also called ARC, ADHD Rewired Coaching. And I was like, oh, convergence.
Hey, baby. Yeah.
So talk about that. What is that for you?
Well, we can find that burnout actually is more severe as we approach our 40s and our 50s, sometimes even in the 30s. And so I've been really delving into the psychological study and the physiological study of what's really occurring here. And I've really appreciated a lot of Arthur Brooks' work, who's a Christian social scientist. And I love his approach and his pragmatic methodology, where he's combining social science, but he's also combining experience. And I tell you what resonated with me was his principle of arc jumping. So, first of all, what is a midlife crisis? That's such a buzzword, it's even platitudinal, it's so overused at this point. But midlife crisis, essentially, if we were to provide a visual for it, is every life, every career, every intention, every task has a natural arc to it. It goes up, it peaks, it plateaus, and it declines, it falls. And we don't like this as human beings. We get to the decline and we panic. We have fear, we have FOMO, we have embarrassment. It hurts our ego, it hurts our plan. It's not our plan. Our plan is meteoric rise from start to finish. And then it makes it worse when we go on social media and see that Taylor Swift just surpassed $1 billion, the first musician to make $1 billion on tour. And we think we have to be there and make $1 billion in our career next year. And we have to progress. And I love that we have this insatiable desire, if we give ourselves over to it, of progression. I really think it's actually a sliver of divinity in us. I think we are divine beings of eternal progression. I really do. And I think it's a wonderful, positive thing. Where it gets toxic is we think that everything in our life should always be on the incline. And when we experience change, whether it be vicissitudinal or whether it be gradual, we panic and therefore can cause crises, the most famous of which is the midlife crisis, although we have crises all throughout our lives, especially when change and arcs decline. And the midlife crisis happens because Arthur Brooks talks about moving from one intelligence to another. The first half of our life generally is building, risking, entrepreneurial, or maybe it's career grinding. We're grinding away and trying to establish this arc and push it up. And boy, we're seeing that growth and getting motivated by it. And then as it plateaus and starts to decline, we panic and we want to bend that arc up. And so we'll do a number of irrational things. It could be anything from destroying a relationship that's been something so important to us by infidelity. It could be bending the arc up by surgery. It could be bending the arc up by exploration into things we shouldn't be exploring, drugs, like all kinds of things could be going on here. Midlife crisis, buying sports cars because we want to impress people. I don't know what the desire necessarily behind that is, and Arthur Brooks says this is extremely unfortunate because really what's happening is a natural transition from intelligence flow, he calls it, to the crystallized intelligence stage of our life, where as the arc is declining, we can jump to another arc that's still on its way up, that's related. Now, when we arc jump, I don't want us to think of that as I'm a cellist right now and I'm going to jump over to the arc of politics, or I'm going to jump to the arc of being, I'm trying to think of something random, like what's the guy in a bar that kicks people out? A bouncer,
Bouncer.
right? Yeah, like I mean, like that's so unrelated. And sometimes people chase after that because they want something totally different. I get it, but I promise you right now, if you're experiencing this arc decline, I promise you that there's still other arcs that are related that are on their way up, and you jump over to those arcs, and that is really what eternal progression is about: is arc jumping and letting arcs decline, because it's a natural process. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We shouldn't be upset at it. Johann Sebastian Bach was brilliant at this. Darwin was horrible at this. Darwin got so upset at the end of his life because he wasn't considered a prominent scientist anymore, because his theories had become somewhat passe and people had moved on, like they do. I mean, we move on faster today than we've ever moved on. Our news cycle is what, 22 hours now instead of 24 hours or whatever. And our skip and scroll culture is, experiencing 5 seconds of social media before we move on. So it's natural, obviously, for an arc to decline. But Darwin got so upset and his ego was so bruised that he died an unhappy man, even though his work is still considered so paramount in his field. And he didn't know that that's the way it was going to be. But at the end of his life, he died penniless, sad, depressed, nobody around him. It's a really sad story, actually. But Bach, on the other hand, you may not know, even though his music is so revered today and considered the zenith of classical music, at the end of his life, he was a nobody, veritably. People had moved on from Baroque music by the time he had died, and they had moved on to the next period, which was classical music. And that's Mozart's era. But before Mozart was CPE Bach, Bach's son. And he was a superstar. Bach's music was like, nobody cared about it anymore. CPE all of a sudden was the next thing. And Bach, instead of getting Darwinistically upset and ego bruised, celebrated it. He's like, this is so great. He was his son's greatest cheerleader. And Bach switched to a new arc. And for him, it was related. It was teaching. It was imparting. It was building curriculum that we still use today. And he took great pleasure in that and joy in that. So for me, like, I'm experiencing this perpetual burnout that's ended in what could have been a midlife crisis. But I promise you that if you focus on this, you can turn your midlife crisis into a midlife crescendo. And how you do it is you jump to a related arc. For me, that actually is, instead of, I've learned over the past 20 years how to entertain an audience. I'm not the best at it, but I think I have a pretty good grip on it after so much experience in it. And in my concerts, I usually am 70% performance and music and 30% storytelling. I love storytelling. In fact, I love storytelling so much, I'm jumping to a new arc and doing a lot more keynote speaking. And that's more like 70% speaking and 30% music. I still bring my cello. And that's totally a related arc. It's fresh, it's new, but I have a really good footing in understanding how to do it. But it's also very challenging. And I feel like that arc is on the way up. But I don't have to start over and be totally, risk-taking and grinding all with it, because I feel like I've already done that. So I've shifted from building to imparting. That may be something you want to consider. If you're finding yourself in a midlife crisis stage, can you shift from building and grinding to imparting and teaching and mentoring? And you'll find great fulfillment in that. So that, in my opinion, is how you turn midlife crisis into midlife crescendo, is moving from building and risking to imparting and mentoring.
How do you find the difference between that and your run-of-the-mill ADHD? I'm bored.
Well, there's a lot of answers to that. I think that it depends on the way it depends, I guess, is the answer to that. If it's a superfluous or kind of like just sort of an I'm bored, temporary boredom, that's different than a perpetual or sort of like a chronic boredom. If it's chronic boredom, then again, I promise arc jumping actually could solve that problem too. If it's a temporary boredom, it just means that, hey, it's just one of those days and you can get through it. Time is a great healer of that kind of situation. But arc jumping can cure boredom, which I think when we apply the label of boredom as ADHD gifted people to unfulfillment or misalignment of our fulfillment. So are you really bored or are you unfulfilled? Ask yourself that question. And if you are unfulfilled, the only person that's going to change that is you. No one's going to come along and hand you fulfillment in a scroll. Your boss isn't going to, your wife isn't going to, your husband, your kids, your coworkers, whatever. They're not going to hand you fulfillment. You have your hand on that helm and you can turn the ship. or you can let it just simply stand in the doldrums. You can get out the oars and oar until you find wind, which is kind of what I've had to do, or you could just sit in the doldrums and complain about how stale the day is. But you are in charge. I want you to say to yourself, I am in charge. I am unfulfilled. I want to find a related arc that I can jump to. And that the great thing about that too is it doesn't mean that you abandon the arc that you're on. You can actually straddle two arcs at the same time and do the splits for a little bit of time, depending on how flexible you are, literally and figuratively. For me, I'm straddling two arcs right now, and I feel comfortable doing it. But eventually, I've got to decide on this new arc. But that's okay. Let it ride. I think we get so afraid of closing a door to open another one because we'll never be able to go back in that door. Just give yourself some grace, calm down. Don't let fear control your thoughts and say, hey, I can straddle two arcs at the same time. And as you do that, you'll discover fulfillment in one arc and you can have a beautiful sense of closure with the other arc, or let it run as long as you're comfortable doing that and it isn't inhibiting your new arc.
I think I'm definitely going to be taking that idea of arc jumping into my 3 weeks off vacation that I am very much looking forward to doing. Now, as you were talking about this,
let's take that. Let's just do that. Let's do a practical approach to that. As you're doing that, I want you to list on one side of the paper, you draw a line vertically through the middle of the paper. I want you to list on one side on your vacation all of the things you're engaged in. And I want you to put a fulfillment score by each one of them. You can use 1 through 10, 1 through 100, whatever. What is your fulfillment score with each one of those? Then on the right side, I want you to write all the things that you're either partially engaged in or not engaged in at all that are related to the left side. And I want you to put a potential fulfillment score on each one of those. And then I want you to just analyze it and write down whatever comes to your head as you're looking at the left side and the right side and your fulfillment scores and these related arcs. And you're really going to be able to zero in on where that next sense of fulfillment lies and how long you'll be able to straddle both sides of those paper.
I don't know what's going to come out of that, but I got that visceral like feeling and goosebumps like that will likely work for me. So I'm looking forward to doing that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Glad. Yeah. And I hope that's helpful to anybody out there that's struggling with this too and needing a new arc, is you've got to put it on paper. It doesn't have to look organized or pretty. Just throw up on a piece of paper through a pencil or a pen, left side, right side. And then you've got to be analytical about it. Don't get into paralysis mode. Just let your heart and your mind say a prayer before it or meditate before it with your intention. Visualize what you're after. Say a prayer for help. And then really, I promise you'll be guided to where that fulfillment is going to come.
So one more question here. So we're talking about arc jumping, talking about joy and happiness. I'm connecting your video of So Happy Together, where you skydive with your cello. First of all, was the cello okay in landing? And what was that like?
Well, okay. So, first of all, so those that you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and just search "Me and My Cello." This was a very off-the-cuff, spontaneous music video that we filmed based around the famous Turtles tune, da-da-da-da-da-da, imagine me and you, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So I'm constantly trying to convince young people who are playing their instrument to make friends with their instrument. So it's not their enemy. And I did it in a comical way over the top by insisting that I was walking around town with my cello and we did things like bumper cars together. We played pool together. We played golf together. We ate at a restaurant together.
Doing laundry.
Yeah, exactly. We did so many different things together because I want to stress this whole thing of naming your instrument and becoming friends with it and really spending quality time with it. And at the end, I skydive out of a plane. Now, the plan was for me to skydive with this cello. And when I got there, I had skydived before and they said, unless I had a certain number of jumps, and I can't remember the number, but it was an astronomically high number, they said, no way. And here's why. When you skydive with a foreign object strapped to you, the wind tends to push whatever's lightest to the top. So if you have a cello strapped to your chest, it's going to want to throw you off balance and put you into a massive circle or a horrible cycle. And they said it's very dangerous. So I got into the airplane and then I had a stunt man, and I hope that's not disappointing to all of you out there. I had a stunt man do the actual jump, and he'd done 6,000 jumps. But here's what's interesting. If you look at the video, at the very last second, he starts to really shake, like the cello is wanting to be on top, and it's pretty scary. He actually had an emergency release on that cello, and he said, if I'm in danger, I'm letting that cello go. And I said, I understand. It's a stunt cello too. It's not my real cello. It's a cello I got off of Amazon for $200 that like plays so badly. So I was like, if it falls, it falls, no big deal. So, but he actually landed and the cello remains intact and it's still in my cello collection and I still can play it. It still sounds horrible, but it looked good enough. And that's sort of the stunt. So I was a stunt man and a stunt cello in that video.
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love that story. That's fantastic. So I hope that this really resonated with all of our listeners. See what I did there? All right.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
Anything you want to leave listeners with? And thank you so much for being so generous with your time here.
My pleasure, Eric. Thank you for this fun interview and these insightful, deep questions. I hope you felt something today. Those of you who are listening, I hope you felt this powerful, unsinkable emotion of hope. And I want you to grab a hold of that. And whatever it is that's tricking you into thinking that you are incapable, or tricking you into thinking that you are less than everybody around you, or tricking you into think that you do not have a future in whatever ambition that you have. I want you to, in your self-talk, I want you to say, I'm going to stop you right there. Here's how I see it. And I want you to tell yourself how things really are. And those things are, you have an invaluable soul that is infinitely invaluable. Your soul is of such worth and so unique. Nobody else is like you in the world. And as a result, you can be confident and have faith that you have a work to do that nobody else can do. And your work includes, in fact, is contingent upon the gifts you've been given. You cannot do your work without your gift of ADHD. Embrace it. Love it. Be grateful for it. Yes, there are weaknesses inherent in it, but that is part of your strength because you will need humility going forward as well in order to make a difference in the lives of others. Embrace your weaknesses. Consider them your grounding tool to stay humble. Embrace the strengths and consider them your superpower to do your work on the earth, to lift others, to be a spokeswoman or man for hope in this world with so many spokesmen for despair, and to counterbalance all of the negative, perfectionistic, toxic comparison out there and insist on lifting those around you. And I promise you, as you do this, finding the arcs in your life that are fulfilling, spinning the plates and being so ever present as you're spinning them, I promise you will find great fulfillment, happiness, and success in your life.
Stephen Sharp Nelson. You can find him at StephenSharpNelson.com and, of course, at thepianoguys.com. Stephen, this conversation has truly been music to my ears.
Thank you very much, Eric. That's very, very, very sweetly said. Thank you for everybody who's made it to the end of this. You're my hero. Thank you. There was a lot of tangential blah blahing, but I just am so grateful for you, and I'm with you. You're my people. I'm your people. We're in this together, and we could do this.
Thanks so much. And that's all for today. A really big thank you to Stephen Sharp Nelson for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. If you want to get in touch or grab any of the resources mentioned in today's episode, head on over to ADHDrewired.com/podcast to find it all. Have any thoughts to share about the topics discussed in today's show? Then check out our free Facebook community at ADHDrewired.com/community. There you can find other tips, tricks, and threads from other community members and from me and our other ADHD Rewired coaches. Have other questions you'd like to ask? Why not join my team and I next Tuesday for our monthly live Q&A. And if you missed last month's Q&A, you'll be able to hear the recording of that next week as well. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast and want to support the work we're doing, consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, where you can get full uninterrupted episodes with bonus content and announcements at the end for just $5 a month or more. And right now, we could really use your support more than ever. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon to get ad-free episodes and to find all the tiers and all the perks. Not sure where to start? You can find it all at the website, from information about our coaching program to our virtual co-working community at Adult Study Hall at adultstudyhall.com, or you can learn how to apply to our free and secret Facebook community and more at ADHDrewired.com. Thank you again to Stephen Sharp Nelson for joining me today. We'll see you next week, hopefully live at our monthly live Q&A. And if you have someone in mind that you think would enjoy listening to this episode, share it, and thanks.